friends. Ooh, this background is getting a little beat up. There, that's better. So this week is my final Halloween video for this year, and I've saved my most exciting for last. Well, it's also the most time-consuming, but I'm excited for it. Let's paint some Halloween squishies. While I love watching squishy painting, I never thought I'd personally like doing it, until I made this little girl. Her name is Jessica, and I made her in a Dollar Tree makeover video. But the point is, I've been itching to do squishies again ever since. And I might have gone a little overboard buying blank squishies. But for this video, I picked out these 5. I'm not sure that I'm going to get to all of these with the time that I have, but we'll see how it goes. I ordered all of these squishies off Amazon, and they're white and squishy. Is it a good squish? I have no idea. I'm not a squishy connoisseur. But I have watched enough squishy makeover videos that I at least have an idea of the order of operations here. So first, I'm going to trim off some of these super snaggly looking seams, and then I'll give all of the squishies a light sanding. I know sometimes squishies can be too smooth for the paint to stick, and I want to avoid that. Although honestly, I can't tell a difference from before sanding. So maybe that means they were already grippy enough? I mean, every stray piece of fuzz in the air is already sticking to them anyway. I'm going to start with this unicorn. When I was trimming the seams, my obsessiveness got the best of me, and I couldn't stop unless the seam was perfectly flat, which in some areas left a little bit of a wound. I'm not sure if it's a big enough area to be really obvious later, and I don't want to spend a ton of extra time on this, but I also don't want to ruin the final squishy with an ugly scar. So I used some white slick paint to sort of go over and fill in those areas. I tried to use a flat brush at a really shallow angle to sort of level the paint without brushing any of it away. I know other people use popsicle sticks, but I didn't wanna. After the paint dried, I ran into my first problem. I guess that sanding didn't work. So I dug out the roughest sanding stick that I had and went to town. And I mean, I was working on these, really digging in and making sure the squishy was getting beat up. By the time I did all the other ones, my hand was hurting. So now let's do the seams all over again. It seemed to stick this time, so now I can finally start on the actual painting. So like I said, this is a unicorn, but what does a unicorn have to do with Halloween? Other than that it's a made-up creature. Well, this unicorn is going to be wearing a costume. Ew, that's a mess. Gonna need to clean that up. As I said, this unicorn is going to be wearing a costume. And in case it's not super obvious, his face, mane, and tail are going to be poking out. You know how costumes always have a hole for your hair? I'm trying to be pretty precise on these edges because I'm super nervous. I don't know why, but sometimes I just get so nervous for certain steps of a project. Like that one little thing is just going to ruin it. It's not like I haven't ruined plenty of things before. After the first coat, there's like white spots. I'm guessing that that's my sanding job, so I did go back over it with another coat. I'm using a mix of slick and matte paint, but honestly, it's probably 2/3 matte paint. I have no idea if that's the right ratio because no one ever seems to specify, but it's what I used. And despite being careful, there's still lots of touch-ups, which are secretly one of my favorite parts, just because they're so satisfying. Then I painted this weird spot on his nose because I didn't know what else to do with it. I don't know what it actually is. It's not like his actual nose area, but it's raised, so I couldn't just leave it blank. But it gives him a weird look, like a cartoon mouse or something. I gave him some purple hooves, Oh yeah, the costume has holes for his feet too. And then, since I don't have any metallic puffy or slick paint, I'm using a silver brush-on fabric paint for his horn. I don't know if it's going to be weird or scratchy on a squishy, but it is going to take a lot of coats. Finally getting to this costume, and this is going to be a skeleton. So I'm adding some bones. I guarantee this is not accurate bone structure for a horse-like animal, but that's why it's a costume. Although I did sort of struggle with how many bones to add. I painted the inside of his ears red, which makes no logical sense since his ears are inside the costume, but yeah. Then it was time for the face. I just figured out who he looks like. Last, some little highlights in his eyes, and he's done. I have no idea if I did half of these steps correctly, but he turned out pretty cute, so I guess it worked out all right. I think I'll name him Bones. The next squishy I'm going to do is this Frankenstein. And to start, I want to fill in these eyes and mouth because they aren't going to work for what I plan to do. I used some thick red slick paint, mostly because that's what I have a ton of. And while I'm waiting for that to dry completely, I'm going to work on his outfit. This is actually going to be a dog in a Frankenstein costume, so his clothes are going to be standard Frankenstein uniform. And yes, I know Frankenstein was the doctor and not the monster, but he needs a name. We'll call him Frank Jr. This squishy is just sucking in the paint in some areas, so I guess that means I sanded it really well. But I need squishy gesso. While I was working on the clothes, I was also going back and forth, adding more coats of slick paint to the face. And my background just keeps getting messier and messier because I keep dropping squishies while I'm painting them. I don't know if other crafters work in an organized fashion, but I sure don't. I always have about 5 different projects just out of frame so that I can work on a section of something, set it off to the side to dry, and then grab something else to work on a part of it. And usually not in any logical order because I need to maximize my time. So I'll paint as much as I can before I absolutely have to set it down to dry. Frank Jr.'s head really soaked in that paint like a sponge, which, I guess he is a sponge technically. So I just kept adding coats until it looked more even. Finally, I felt like the texture on his face was covered enough that I could move on to a white base coat. I did lay it on a little thick, not only to fill it in, but also to cover up that red. When I'm adding the green of his head, I was trying to go super cleanly around the edge, and I was sort of leaning his head to one side to stretch out the neck crease. But I didn't realize that by doing that, I was squishing the opposite side and making a giant mess for myself. See, here I am trying to fix a tiny spot with water on a brush, and not even realizing that I'm making an even bigger mess. So after cleaning most of that up, I tried again, being very careful not to bend his neck in any way. After many coats of green and cleanup, it was time for the face. The actual dog part of the dog in a Frankenstein costume. And then while I was waiting for that to dry, I moved on to the belt. See, jumping around everywhere. I was struggling to decide what color to make his hands. Are they green and part of the costume, or are they white and they're his paws? I'm going to go with white for his paws. Then jump back to the belt buckle. And then, because I learned my lesson from the 8 coats of metallic paint on the unicorn horn, I did a gray base coat over the bolts before I added silver paint. Jumping back to his paws for some spots, and then, since I don't think it's very clear what's going on with his face, I outlined it with black to show that these are his ears. I also added his facial details so you can actually maybe tell that this is a dog. After adding the little eye shinies, he's done. His face is weirdly glossy compared to the rest of him, but otherwise he's pretty cute. Next is this bat. And this guy is actually the squishy that gave me the idea for this theme of animals in costumes. When I first bought all these squishies, I was showing them to my niece, and she called this guy a penguin. She's 3, so I won't shame her too hard, but it did give me the idea to paint this bat as something else. He's not going to be a penguin, however, because I'm not that confident in my creativity skills. I can barely paint the ears evenly. Let me fix that. Her wings and legs and claws are going to be normal bat colors, but her body is going to be orange because she's going to be wearing a pumpkin costume. And there's this weird hole in her booty area that I don't know how to fix, so I'll just add some more paint. But she wasn't looking pumpkin-y enough, so I added stripes to be the pumpkin creases. And I sort of ended up with a pumpkin butthole on the bottom. Then it was time for the jack-o'-lantern face, and this is the part that I'm most proud of. Because I didn't really plan ahead, so I didn't think about that chest hair showing, but in a very genius move, I turned it into a weird mouth. Look, it looks so cute. At the last minute, I decided to add a little pumpkin hat on him, with a stem that looks weirdly like a pepper. And then his little face. So adorable. I love him. I think he's my favorite. His name is Bathio.
So stupid.
The last one I had time for is this ghost. And this is going to take some creativity because he's not really a shape easily turned into anything else. While I'm mulling that over, I'm going to paint the whole thing white. I'm thinking that I'll just add a face, so the ghost part is the costume. But this thing is soaking in so much paint that it doesn't look like I'm doing anything at all. This took coat after coat after coat. I think it was 5 or 6 coats of white alone to make this not look like a sponge. Once I was finally able to move on, I did sketch out my idea off camera because I was a little scared. And I decided to do eye cutouts like a lot of old ghost costumes. And what has very recognizable eyes? An owl. I also decided to add the owl wings just in case there was any doubt. But the wings can just be chilling outside of the costume, so he's going to be holding a little candy bag. I wanted it to be really obvious what I'm going for, so he has some owly eyebrows and feather details on his wings. Then I finished up his eyes, and then the bag. My handwriting is terrible, but at least it doesn't look like a purse anymore. Can't forget those eye shinies, and he's finished. He's not the most exciting, but I actually really like him. His squish is a little more exploding marshmallow-like, but I'll poke some pinholes in him later and he'll calm down. And that's all I had time for this week. I did start the 5th squishy, but this is as far as I got, so maybe someday in the future I'll finish him. What do you think? I hope you've all had a great spooky season. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.